The rain began the way grief does, soft at first, almost like a whisper. Then slowly, cruelly, it consumed everything. It was the 10th anniversary of the accident, and Mira stood at the edge of the old railway track, her hands trembling beneath a wool shawl that once belonged to her mother. The town hadn't changed much, still quiet, still filled with the kind of silence that screams in your ears when the memories come back too loudly. The track itself was rusted and unused, weeds overtaking the wooden planks. But for her, it remained a scar in the earth, as raw as the day it split her world in two. She hadn't planned to come back. For 10 years, she'd run. New cities, new jobs, new lovers who tried to fix her, then left when they couldn't. But this year, something changed. Maybe it was the way she woke from the same dream for the 7th night in a row. Liam's laugh echoing through the station, his hands cupping her face, his voice saying, "Stay, just one more minute." Or maybe it was the box of his letters, found in the attic of her childhood home, buried beneath layers of things that should have stayed forgotten. They were all signed the same way. Forever, no matter what. L. Forever had only lasted 314 days. Liam was the kind of person who made silence feel full. He'd loved her in a way that frightened her, without conditions, without apologies. She had been 21, angry at the world, angry at her father, who had died in a different kind of accident, and Liam had walked into her life like a sunrise. They met at the train station. Not romantically. He spilled coffee on her. She'd screamed. He'd laughed. Somehow, that turned into lunch, which turned into 3 years of love packed into less than one. Mira had never believed in forever, but Liam had. He'd written it in every card, whispered it into her neck when she cried in her sleep, said it like a promise he was willing to bleed for. And he did. The accident wasn't dramatic in the newspapers. Train derails outside Cedar Hill, 3 dead, 27 injured. That's what the headline read. But to Mira, it might as well have said, "The world has ended." Yours, specifically. She had almost been on that train. She had begged him not to take it, asked him to wait, to stay one more night. But he'd kissed her forehead and said, "I'll be back before you miss me." The train didn't come back. For days, she wandered the hospital corridors, holding on to the edge of hope with white knuckles. But on the 3rd day, a nurse, with trembling lips and eyes full of sorrow, handed her a plastic bag. Inside was Liam's wallet, his phone, and a blood-stained journal. She didn't open it for 7 years, and when she finally did, it broke her all over again. It wasn't what he wrote, it was what he didn't. There were blank pages, entire days where Liam hadn't written a word. Mira imagined him sitting alone in a station somewhere, pen in hand, heart too heavy to speak. She wept until her ribs ached. Now, standing on the same railway where fate had torn him away, Mira tried to remember the sound of his voice. She tried to remember the softness in his eyes when he'd look at her like she was the only thing that mattered. But grief does cruel things. It wears down even the strongest memories, like waves smoothing out the edges of stone. She walked along the tracks, not knowing where her feet were taking her. It didn't matter. She just wanted to feel close to him. Maybe this was why she came back. To let herself hurt in the place where everything began. The rain intensified, soaking through her shawl, chilling her skin. But she didn't care. Pain had been her companion for so long, she didn't know how to live without it. In the distance, she heard footsteps. She turned, startled, and saw a boy, maybe 10 years old, standing by the platform. He held a red balloon, absurdly bright against the grey of the storm. "You're not supposed to be here," she called, wiping water from her face. The boy tilted his head. Neither are you. There was something in his voice. Familiar. Almost too familiar. What's your name? Kaschuwaik asked. Ingi tading gasarasanda starobanan it had in years. The boy shrugged. Don't remember. Mira stepped forward, something primal pulling her. Where are your parents? He looked past her. Gone. Like yours. Her breath caught. Who told you about my parents? The boy said nothing, just watched her with eyes too old for his face. The wind tugged at his balloon, but he didn't let go. Mira felt a shiver crawl down her spine. Do you know me? The boy smiled sadly. You used to laugh more, before the train. She stumbled back. Who are you? But the boy just turned and began walking away, his balloon trailing behind him. Wait, she shouted, but when she ran after him, he was gone. Only the balloon remained, caught in the branches of a dead tree. She stared up at it, her mind spinning. Was she hallucinating? Had grief finally broken her? The next day, she returned to the station. She brought the journal this time, sat on the bench where Liam used to wait for her after her shift. She opened it to a page that had always made her cry. November 3rd. I saw her laugh today. It made everything else worth it. I know we're not perfect, but I'd go through 1,000 hard days just to hear that sound again. She pressed her fingers to the words, as if she could draw warmth from them. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. I used to write things too, but I stopped when people stopped reading. She turned sharply. It was the boy again. This time, she didn't ask how or why. She just stared at him. His eyes were Liam's, not the color. The way they looked at her, like she was both beautiful and tragic, like he already knew all her secrets. She whispered, Are you? The boy nodded, then pointed to the journal. You didn't read the last page. I did, she said. It was blank. He walked over, opened the journal, and flipped to the back. There, scribbled in faint pencil, was a sentence she had missed. You were my home. Tears poured down her face, hot despite the cold. The boy, Liam, a memory, a ghost, a vision, reached out and touched her hand. You can live, Mira. You don't have to keep dying with me. She sobbed. I don't know how. Yes, you do. You just forgot. She woke on the platform bench, the journal still in her lap, dry despite the rain. The balloon was gone. For the first time in years, she looked up at the sky and didn't feel like it was crushing her. Maybe she had imagined him. Maybe not. But the message was real. You were my home. She went back to the house the next day, cleaned out the attic, painted the walls, took out the broken mirror in the hallway, cooked something warm, opened the windows. Grief didn't leave. It never really does. But it changed shape. It softened. Years passed. Mira built a life. Quiet at first, volunteering at the shelter, teaching art to children, planting a garden behind the house. One spring morning, a girl with sad eyes and trembling hands came to her class. Mira sat beside her and offered her a brush. The girl said, I don't know how to do this. Mira smiled gently. That's okay. I'll show you. That night, she opened Liam's journal again. She wrote on a new page. Year 11. Today, I remembered how to laugh. The laughter didn't come like thunder. It came like a fragile note, barely audible, rising gently from her throat, as the little girl beside her accidentally splashed green paint across both their canvases. I ruined it. The girl whimpered, frowning at the mess. No, Mira said softly. You made it brave. The girl blinked up at her. Brave. Sometimes the boldest strokes start as mistakes. Her voice caught. She hadn't spoken like that in years, not with comfort, not with care. But it didn't feel forced. It felt like healing. The girl smiled and pressed her hand into the wet paint, leaving a print in the corner of the paper. "Now it's mine," she said. And Mira, watching her, felt something inside her knit itself together again, thread by thread. Later that night, as she sat alone by the fireplace, she picked up Liam's journal and traced her fingers over the cover. Her handwriting now mingled with his, memories and moments colliding on the same pages. But it no longer felt like a tomb. It felt like a bridge. She thought of the boy, his eyes, his voice, the ache and wonder of his brief presence. Maybe he had only ever been in her mind. Maybe not. But whatever he was, he had brought her back to life. Year 12 came. Mira bought an old cafe on the corner near the train station and named it the Waiting Room. Locals said it was ironic. Mira thought it was poetic. She put up old photos of trains and stations, love letters in frames, and a corner for people to leave notes to the ones they'd lost. She called it the Memory Wall. People came in quietly at first, widows, war veterans, estranged siblings, and they'd sit, sip coffee, and stare at the wall. Sometimes they cried, sometimes they smiled, sometimes they left a note and never returned. One day, Mira found a crumpled letter tucked behind a flower vase. It read, "To the one I drove away, I finally forgave myself. I hope one day you will too. Your brother." She placed it on the wall with care and stood before it for a long time, thinking of her own brother, Michael, who hadn't spoken to her in 8 years. Not since the fight. Not since he accused her of pushing Liam away, of always needing control, of blaming everyone but herself. She had told him to leave. He had. Neither reached out since. That night Mira pulled out her phone. Hands trembling, she typed his number. It still worked. The ring echoed 5 times. Then, "Hello?" Mira closed her eyes. "Michael?" Silence. Then a long, weary breath. "Mira, is that really you?" "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for everything." Another pause. Then, in a choked voice, "Me too." That was how it started. They met 2 weeks later in the cafe. He had aged, lines carving his once boyish face, but his eyes were soft, like a truce flag waving. They didn't speak of the past at first. They spoke of books, of weather, of coffee. Slowly, cracks opened, truth poured out. "I hated myself for yelling at you that day," he said. "But I didn't know how to hold your grief. You were drowning, and I couldn't pull you out." "I didn't want to be pulled out," she admitted. "I wanted the sea to take me." He nodded. "I know." He reached across the table and took her hand. "But you came back." "I had help," she smiled. "A boy, a vision, a ghost." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Ghost?" "Long story." He chuckled. "Then we've got time." Year 13 passed gently. Mira traveled for the first time since Liam's death. She visited the places they dreamed of going: Barcelona, Kyoto, the redwoods of California. She took pictures with an old Polaroid and wrote postcards to herself. "Today, I watched the sun rise over the ocean. I think Liam would have loved it. Today, I climbed a mountain and felt breathless, not from grief, but from wonder. Today, I danced in a street fair and forgot I ever knew sorrow." Each one was a tiny resurrection. When she returned, she added a travel journal to the waiting room's shelves and encouraged others to do the same. In year 14, an old man collapsed just outside the cafe. Mira rushed out, calling an ambulance, holding his hand as they waited. He looked up at her, eyes glassy. "Don't let go." "I won't." He smiled faintly. "My wife, she died in this spot, 10 years ago. I come here every day to be near her." Tears welled in her eyes. Then she's never really left. He squeezed her hand. Thank you. He survived, and came back every Sunday, bringing daisies for Mira and calling her his angel. The town began to change. Or maybe Mira did. People no longer whispered when they saw her. They smiled, waved, asked about the special of the day. Children called her Miss Mira and begged for cookies shaped like hearts. One snowy morning in year 15, a letter arrived. There was no return address. Inside was a single photograph of her and Liam on their last Christmas together. She didn't know who had sent it. But on the back was a note. You were always his home, Mira. He knew it. We all did. Someone who remembers. She placed the photo behind the counter, beside the register where she could see it every day. In year 16, a young man walked into the cafe with a guitar and asked if he could play in the evenings. His name was Jude. He had kind eyes and a voice like velvet. He sang old songs, love songs, songs that made Mira cry without knowing why. One night, after everyone had left, he sat beside her. Who was he? Jude asked. She didn't have to ask who he meant. His name was Liam, she said. He died on a train 10 years ago. Jude nodded. He must have been extraordinary. He was, she whispered. But he wasn't perfect. Just mine. Jude didn't try to fix her, didn't reach for her hand or offer sympathy. He just sat there, present, and that was enough. They became friends, slow and warm, like tea that takes time to steep. Year 17 came with news. Her mother's old house, the one in the countryside, was being sold. Mira hadn't been there since she was a girl. Something in her ached to return. She took the weekend off, packed a bag, and drove 3 hours through winding roads and fading memories. The house was smaller than she remembered. Dusty, quiet. She walked through each room, touching the wallpaper, the furniture, the cracks in the windows. In the attic, she found a box labeled Mira's Dreams. Inside were drawings she'd made as a child. A cafe with a garden. A home with books stacked to the ceiling. A little girl with a balloon. She sat on the floor and wept. Somehow, she had become who she once imagined. Not because she chased it, but because she finally let the pain teach her. She returned with the box and placed it on the cafe's front shelf with a sign. Childhood Dreams. Borrow one. People did. Children drew pictures. Adults left wishes. The shelf grew fuller each week. In year 18, Mira wrote a letter to Liam. Dear L, I used to think I died with you, but I didn't. I just slept. You were the storm that broke me, but you were also the light that woke me. I miss you every day, but I'm no longer haunted. I'm honored. I carry you, not as a wound, but as a heartbeat. You would have loved this life I'm building. Maybe you still do. Forever, no matter what. M. She folded the letter and placed it in the memory wall. It stayed there untouched. Year 19 arrived like an unexpected guest. One morning, Mira walked into the cafe and found Jude holding a newborn. The mother had fainted outside, and he'd brought her in. Mira watched the tiny fingers curl around Jude's thumb. Something shifted in her chest. Later, Jude found her in the kitchen, quiet. You okay? She nodded. I want to adopt. He blinked. Really? Yeah. I've carried sorrow for so long. Maybe it's time I carried joy. 2 years later, she did. A baby girl named Eden. She was perfect, and loud, and stubborn, and beautiful. On Eden's 3rd birthday, Mira showed her a picture of Liam. He's in heaven, Mira said, but he helped bring you to me. Eden touched the photo and said, he looks kind. He was. In year 20, Mira returned to the station one last time. She stood at the edge of the platform, Eden in her arms. I met someone here, she whispered, and lost him. But I also found myself again. Eden looked up. Is this where the sky lives? Mira smiled. Yes, baby. Yes, it is. Eden tugged at Mira's scarf as the wind whipped across the station platform. Mama, she said, will I ever get sad like you? Mira crouched down, brushing curls away from Eden's face. Yes, sweetheart. Everyone gets sad sometimes. But sadness isn't the end of the story. Eden squinted at the tracks. Did the trains cry too? Mira blinked hard. Sometimes I think they did. She kissed her daughter's forehead and stood, lifting her into her arms. The memory of Liam didn't sting as it once had. Pulsed like a soft light now, something she carried rather than something she fled. Back at home, the cafe buzzed with quiet joy. The walls were filled with photographs now, smiling faces, written prayers, tiny notes like leaves growing from branches of a family tree. The memory wall had outgrown the corner and spread across the room. And among those notes, nestled in the center, was a single envelope, marked with a shaky hand. To the one who taught me grief could bloom. Mira opened it late one night. Inside was a torn page from an old Bible, the verse underlined, "Those who sow in tears shall reap in joy." Psalm 126, verse 5. She wept for a long time, not from pain, but from gratitude. Jude came into her life slowly, like a dawn that didn't demand to be noticed. Over the years, his presence wrapped around her like peace. They never forced love. They allowed it to unfold. Eden adored him, called him Papa J. He never tried to replace anyone. He just made room for more. One evening, as they closed the cafe, Mira stood beside him and asked, "Do you ever feel like we're living someone else's life?" He smiled. "Number, I feel like we're living the life we bled for." They married in the garden behind the waiting room with just 10 guests. Michael walked her down the aisle. Eden held a crown of daisies and whispered, "Mama's a princess now." The sky that day held no clouds. During the reception, Jude sang a song he'd written. The lyrics spoke of sorrow turning into soil and love blooming again. When he finished, Mira pressed her forehead to his and said, "He would have liked you." Jude whispered, "I hope so." Years passed like seasons, each one bringing small, quiet miracles. Eden grew bold and bright. She collected stories like seashells and often sat under the memory wall reading people's letters aloud. One day she asked, "Mama, why do people write to the ones they've lost?" Mira thought for a long time. Because sometimes our hearts have more to say, and writing helps it get there. Eden nodded. "I want to write too." She did. Her first note was folded in half and read, "To whoever's missing someone, you're not alone. I miss people too." Mira posted it high, where everyone could see it. Within a week, 10 new notes appeared around it. Strangers, grievers, survivors, all responding. In year 22, Mira received a letter in the mail. It was from the son of the nurse who had handed her Liam's belongings all those years ago. He wrote, "My mother always wondered what happened to you. She carried that moment, giving you the journal, the bag, as one of the hardest things she ever did. When she passed away, we found a note among her things that read, 'Please forgive me for being the messenger of sorrow. I pray she found joy again.'" Mira cried until her hands shook. Then she lit a candle in the cafe window and placed a rose beside it with a sign, "For the ones who carry others' grief. Thank you." She began writing again, not just in Liam's journal, but in new ones. She published a collection called The Sorrowed Heart. It wasn't a bestseller, but it found the right people. Letters poured in from all over the country. I didn't think anyone else understood. You gave language to what I could never say out loud. I read your story and remembered my own. And one from a woman in Nebraska. My son died in a train crash too. I thought the world ended, but your story helped me plant something in the ashes. Mira framed that one. In year 25, Eden was 10, the same age the boy at the station had been. One night, Mira woke to find her daughter standing by the window, staring into the moonlight. "Sweetheart?" Mira whispered. Eden turned. There was a boy. Mira's breath caught. "What boy?" "He was standing by the trees. He said I should tell you thank you." Mira's heart stopped. "What else did he say?" "He said, she kept the promise. She came back." Mira fell to her knees. Eden walked over and wrapped her arms around her mother. "I think he loves you." Mira whispered, "I know he does." That was the night she stopped doubting. Whether ghost, memory, or dream, Liam had come to say goodbye. Or maybe, thank you. Year 30 came with silver hair and laugh lines. The cafe had become a landmark. A woman stopped Mira outside and said, "My daughter brought me here after her husband died. I think it saved her." Mira smiled. It saved me too. She often thought of the girl she had been at 21, furious, broken, lost. She wanted to hold her, to tell her, it won't be fast, it won't be easy, but you will rise, and you will love again. That fall, Eden started her own memory wall in her school. She called it Letters to Heaven. On the first day, she pinned up her note. To Liam, "Thank you for giving my mama back to me. Eden." Mira wept when she read it. Then she wrote her final letter in the journal Liam had once held close. Year 30. You were my sorrow. You were my healing. You were the beginning of my end, and the reason I started again. You were the boy who never came home, and the boy who led me back to mine. I still carry you. Now, you carry me too, forever, no matter what. Your Mira. She closed the book and placed it in a glass case by the memory wall with a sign. This was once my grief. Now, it is my garden. Outside, the trains still came and went, and sometimes, in the early hours before dawn, Mira would sit by the window, her hands curled around a warm cup, and swear she could still hear laughter echoing through the station. Software familiar and free.